I really like Prairie View A&M's decision to hire Tremaine. I really like PV's decision to hire Tremaine Jackson, the former Valdosta State head coach, as the leader of their football program. Let's look at the addition while also looking back at PV's season in review. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And now, of course, Sam Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU World Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day, every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off doesn't mean that the journey's over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com to make every moment more. And if you're new to FanDuel, you get $150 back in bonus bets when you put down a $5 winning bet. Go to FanDuel.com to get started. We'll wrap up today's episode by taking a look back. I want to look back at PV's season in review. This is going to be an ongoing series until we get into basketball season. So we won't hit every school at length, but I think I may try to hit every school at least a little bit, right? Because just time-wise, it won't work that way. But this is a series that's going to go on for a while. In segment one, we're going to kick it off with PV's decision to hire Tremaine Jackson. That's why they're the first up on this list. Not that I wanted to start with PV. I think we all know, if you know what I'm saying, where my loyalties lie. But speaking of those loyalties, this is a Texas Southern alum in Tremaine Jackson. This is somebody who went to TSU for a couple of years before transferring over to Louisiana Monroe. This is somebody who was on the Texas Southern coaching staff for a few seasons and had a high level of success in his area, right? We're talking about the defensive side of the ball before eventually becoming a Valdosta State head coach. There was a couple of stops in between TSU and Valdosta, but the point is, this is somebody who has a lot of the boxes that I wanted to be checked if I'm looking for that PV job. Number one, established and successful head coach. It's not mandatory. You can go get somebody who was a coordinator, but me personally, I like guys who were established and successful head coaches. Second box, a deep connection to the area. A deep connection to the area through playing and through coaching is how he achieves this. And then lastly, familiarity with the conference. That's a nice cherry on top. It's not always necessary, but it does make you feel like your acclimation period should be shorter because you don't have to get used to how things go in the conference. And I don't mean politics and things of that nature. I strictly mean style of play. That shouldn't be a problem for Tremaine Jackson. So PV, I think, has a really good coach. Let's work backwards on that list. Let's start at 3 and work our way up to 1. 2 and 3 kind of go together in a little bit. The third point was familiarity with the conference. The second one was deep connection to the area. You could have that connection to the area through Texas Southern, but it runs deeper than that. Let's start off with TSU. He played in the SWAC for 2 seasons. Jackson was a Texas Southern Tiger for the first 2 seasons. Then he transferred over to Louisiana Monroe, and that's where he finished his career. But when he came back, he was a coach. When he came back to the area, he went and graduated from U of H. When you're talking about his upbringing, he was born in Houston. So that connection to the Houston area runs through probably Little League, high school, college. I know that he did some fellowships. I don't think he ever did a fellowship or whatnot with the Texans. But you're looking at the 3 levels. I don't know if pro really helps you too much as far as recruitment. But if we're speaking recruiting, the area of Texas, the state of Texas and the area surrounding Texas, I should say, that's something that he should have on lock. He probably played football with some of these folks' dad, went to school with some of their moms, right? Like has strong relationship with a lot of these people that he could be recruiting. That's something you can't teach, right? Like you can be charismatic as you want, but if I go and I try to recruit in Massachusetts, It don't matter how cool I am when I step into that living room. I don't have the connections that he has. And that doesn't say that I'll be more or less successful, but there's certain things that you can't teach. There's certain things that you can't buy. Experiences are one of those. Bonds are one of those, right? Like just that familiarity of, oh yeah, I know him. I trust him already. Now I'm going to trust him with my son. Those are things that you can't really. I hope I put them in words, but I don't know if you can completely quantify how important that those things can be when it comes to recruiting players, right? So when he came back to TSU as a coach, he was a defensive line coach for a little bit. Then he was also a defensive coordinator for a season, just one season. It was a very successful season, though. I want to be very clear. We're going to get back to that in a sec. Actually, might as well go now because the next we've wrapped up the idea of connections. We've wrapped up the familiarity with the conference and then also with the area. So now let's get into the success of him as a head coach, which is probably the reason that everybody knows him anyway. I thought that was some nice additional background information that I wanted to present first to lay out the case. Shout out to TSU, even though he's going to be going up 90 real quick to go ahead and be their head coach. I mentioned that TSU coaching experience. He was there for, I think, about 4 seasons, 2008, 9, 10, 11. So, yeah, 4th season. And as a defensive line coach, they had a lot of success. They're one of the best in sacks, tackles for loss. Those are stats that you can point directly to the defensive line. They're not the only ones who do that. They're not the only ones who get tackles for loss and get sacks, but you can point to the defensive line coach as the one who spearheads the charge for both TFLs and sacks. And CSU was best in the country when he was the defensive coordinator. Excuse me, when he was the defensive line coach. When Jackson became the defensive coordinator, they were the best in the country in total defense. So you're looking at success on his side of the ball. That's a specialty. Those are the type of things that get people head coaching opportunities. His head coaching opportunity came later down the line, and he went to Valdosta State. And in there, he developed a quick offense. He quickly developed offense, excuse me. So you see that side of the ball, that's his specialty, excel. Got it. Nice to know. Then he goes somewhere and he's a head coach where he oversees everything. And let's say that he's not putting his touches on the offense and defense, which probably is the case that he's not doing that. He's picking the right people. He's forming coaching staffs, right? You can't be everywhere. You can't do everything. You can't control everything. You gotta delegate. You gotta see who can lead your offense, and maybe you nudge, maybe you sprinkle a little bit of something on there real quick. But for the most part, you got to pick the people who are going to lead the charge, at least on one side of the ball, if not both, depending on what type of head coach you are. I would say that Tremaine Jackson has successfully done that. And it's funny because he operated under some real duress. That's one of the more interesting things about Tremaine Jackson is you see the success that he's had. You see the success that the school has had. But he didn't have that success his first year. And he said people were calling for his head. They wanted his job after that because Valdosta State had a certain standard and he didn't live up to it his first year. I'm not knocking him for that. I don't even think in bringing that back up, it's a way to say, oh, he's a disappointment or he was a disappointment year one. It just took him a second to get his feet underneath him, which is normal. Sometimes we have elevated expectations, but that doesn't make what happened actually not be normal. That is not an abnormal thing for a coach to need a year before he gets acclimated to being a head coach. Well, in year two, in year three, they succeeded, and they succeeded at a high level, right? So the first season, he went 5-6. Wasn't great. People were very upset with him. That's understandable. Year two, he made it to the playoffs, 3rd round, 10 wins in a season. Then in the third season, excuse me, he made it to the playoffs and then made it to the championship game. He was not able to come out victorious, but he did make it to the championship game after going undefeated in the season leading up to that, both the regular season and playoffs, obviously. So you're seeing a coach who, under duress, developed and turned things around quickly. You're seeing a coach who has a specialty. You're seeing a coach who has familiarity with the area, and you're in Texas. I'm trying to dominate Texas in recruiting. People who are not from Texas are running to Texas. You got to put a stranglehold on your state. You got to put a stranglehold over Texas Southern. These are things that we have to have conversations about. These are things that are going to be important. But let's move forward. I think this is a really good hire, by the way. Top 10. Oh, I'm sorry. On his offense, top 10. I think he was close to top 10. In the defense, it was actually top 10. He has top 10 ability on both sides of the football at Valdosta. you gotta think that some of that will translate into PV, and I think it could translate pretty quickly. I'm going to be honest. I don't think that the SWAC West is a division that is in possession of Southerns. They may hold it, but I don't think it's firmly in their possession. That can go anyway. I don't know what it's going to do. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know they can go any which way next season. That's the way I feel about it going into the year. But let's move forward and let's look at PV's year-end review, starting off with what were the expectations and how did they live up to the expectations or live down to them. By the fact that they're hiring a new head coach, I think we can have a little bit of an assumption of what we're going to talk about as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. And did you know Rocket Money helps you find any subscriptions that you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That happens for some people as well. Definitely happened to me that I forgot about a couple of subscriptions. I was like, oh, wow, I'm still paying for that. I stopped using that a couple of years ago. I guess I forgot to cancel. Rocket Money helps me track them all down, and it's like a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, spending habits, or even the goals that you want to have. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions. That's $740 a year for members, right? So for me, the subscription tracker, easily the best thing about it. I would guarantee, or I would suggest that you go do that. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked on today. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day. Every day for your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Longhorns. My guy, Jonathan Davis, they got a W in the college football playoffs over Clemson University. So you go ahead. Is it Clemson University or University of Clemson? We're just going to call it Clemson. They got a win over Clemson. Okay, you go ahead and check that out. Jonathan Davis put out a really good episode earlier today. So the season for Prairie View A&M, unquestioned failure. I don't think that's not me being biased. That's not the flag behind me. That's not any of that. This was an unquestioned failure for Prairie View A&M this season. And this is a weird thing to do off the heels of I like this head coach hiring. But the fact that you're hiring a head coach and it wasn't a Willie Simmons type move, it tells you everything you need to hear. You go look at the vacancies. A&T, failure. North Carolina, Norfolk State, I'll just say continued not being good. I don't even know if I would say failure. Delaware State, same deal. Mississippi Valley State, same deal, or just continued not being good, but they're not successes. They're clear failures. I mean, if you step into the season with higher expectations than I would have for some of these universities, which I'm sure they do, it's a failure. Alabama A&M, failure. Like they didn't live up to what they wanted to do. And I would say North Carolina A&T was the one that was like the most obvious failure. But anyway, no, actually, this was the most obvious failure to me because you look at where PV was expected to be. What are the expectations versus how did they perform? The expectation for PV was to be the second place team in the SWAC West. Were those rankings accurate at all? No. Like those were some terrible rankings. Let me see. I'm going to pull them up because they did not come to fruition at all. And I would say it didn't come to fruition on either side, but the East was much better. We just didn't think Jackson State was going to be the top team. But if you put Jackson State at 1, everything else falls into place. The SWAC West, though, it went Alcorn, PV, Grambling, Southern, UAPB, Texas Southern. First off, Southern was at 4. They won it. Alcorn they were 2, so that was pretty close. Grambling, no. TSU was a shock. TSU was probably the most surprising team. No, Southern was the most surprising team, but TSU was a second place. But PV was voted to finish second, 8 first place votes. It was a confident push between PV and Alcorn. That was supposed to be 1 and 2. I don't look at these as gospel, but if you're looking at the predictions and the first place votes, that was the expectation. That was 1 would be 1 and the other one would be 2. It was just a matter of how it would fall out. Well, Alcorn lived up to their side of the bargain by finishing second, but PV was 4th. And when you look at the games that they lost, this was not a good set of games, man. They lost to TSU in the first game of the season. This is one of the games that you have to win. It's TSU, then SWAC Championship, Celebration Bowl. Obviously, those go in order, but I would say that TSU game being the first game of the season is a tone setter. And you have been dominant in that series, and you didn't dominate. Matter of fact, you got dominated in this game. Then you go and you look at the Southern game. They should have beat Southern, and they lost to Southern. That's like a choke job. So, okay, you win a close one to Grambling the next time you step out on the field. Then you go to UAPB. You fall to them, close one, 4-point loss. You bounce back at homecoming, and you knock off Texas A&M Commerce. Okay, cool. I'm rocking. Homecoming is a good time. Everybody feeling good. Ain't no homecoming like a PV homecoming is what they say. Go ahead and get a W. You go party. I'm all of that. Then you go to Mississippi Valley State. You win that game by 1 point. 1 point. You were narrow. And mind you, this is before they beat FAMU. Before either team beat FAMU. But before Mississippi Valley State beat FAMU. So losing a Valley. Boy, Bo McDowell might have got fired that game. But they won by 1 point. It was really crazy. It was insane. But they snuck away with that. Then you beat FAMU. And at that time, it's looking like, okay, cool. PV starting to put things together. Then they lose to Alcorn. And they lose to Alcorn convincingly. You were supposed to play Alcorn in at least a close one, see if you can push for second place. You lost convincingly, 13-26. Then against Alabama State, you go 6-9, and you lose. So you're looking at FAMU's a quality win, I would say. That's a quality win. Where's the other one? Is Grambling a quality win? I don't think so. I don't think that was a quality win this season. FAMU, I would still say it was. For Grambling, may be a quality win for PV. And FAMU may be a quality win for PV too. And at that time, it was definitely a quality win. We didn't think that Valley would come out and beat FAMU. But once Valley beats them the week after you beat them, it's like, and you beat them without Daniel Richardson. I'm just saying. I'm just putting it out there. That was an abject failure when you're looking at PV season. That's why you have a new head coach. That's why you can lead the charge moving forward. But who led the charge in 2024? And I'm not talking about Bubba McDowell. I'm not talking about the coaching. I'm not talking about the leadership. I mean, who are the star players? And I'll kick it off with somebody that would be really surprising to hear. But I'm going to try to tell you who it is as we continue and wrap up today's episode of Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And if you go to FanDuel.com to get started, you get $150 back in bonus bets if you put down a $5 winning bet. Now, it's Christmas time. You want to make a little bit more money before the end of the year? You do it on Christmas. I know, but follow the NFL's lead. They told you Christmas is not a day to relax. It's a day to put your foot on their neck and continue to apply pressure. Because the NFL is greedy. There's no reason for you to have games on Christmas on Wednesday. It's not necessary. And you may feel the same way about putting down some money, but that's not the case. Put some money down on that Ravens game. Put some money down on that Chiefs game. You got the NBA. I can't even tell you what NBA games going on Christmas, but I can tell you that they got a whole slate because that's their day. It's all on you. It's all on you. If you want to make a little bit of extra cash on Christmas, you just spend a wad on Christmas gifts. Get you a wad back. And if you're new to FanDuel, you get $150 back in bonus bets. You just have to go to FanDuel.com. You go to FanDuel.com to make every moment more, and you get $150 back in bonus bets if you're new to FanDuel when you put a $5 winning bet down. So go to FanDuel.com and make every moment more. As wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. We've broken down what the season was like for PV. We've broken down the new head coach that's coming to town. I like that hire a lot. I think I might have actually suggested him for the TSU job last year. I could have. I don't know. This is only his first year of success after that. Now I want to look at the key players because we're doing this season in review, and I think we may do Norfolk State tomorrow because you have the Michael Vick press conference going on. So I think we may do that Tuesday morning. That's probably what we'll do. But I want to break down some of the key players, and I think that this one might surprise you. It's the kicker. The PV kicker is the first player that I want to name. And this may feel like an indictment of PV, and I think it slightly is, to be honest. I think it slightly is, but not a lot, just a little bit. But what it really represents is how good that the kicker has been. It's more of a testament of the quality of kicker that they have. I just know it's not typical that you bring up a kicker first. That just, that. So it's a little bit of both, but I would say more so on the kicker, because he was really that good. You're looking at, I hope I'm saying this right. Guillermo, I'm just gonna say him Garcia Rodriguez. I was gonna butcher that first name, and I'm sorry. I don't like butchering names. I prefer to just not say them. Mr. Garcia Rodriguez. I can say that. But he was first team all SWAC. You think, okay, first team all SWAC kicker, he's still the first person. Dang, PV sucked. Yes, they did suck. They did. They were garbage. But Mr. Garcia Rodriguez was also a HBCU All-American. And even greater than that, you expanded the range even greater, right? So we went conference, then we went HBCUs, and now we're going the entirety of the nation. He was a second team All-American by AFCA. He was the second team AFCA All-American kicker, which means they're saying this was the second best kicker in the country. Mr. Garcia Rodriguez was efficient. He had range. You saw these big time kicks by him. He set the record for the longest field goal in PV history twice this year with 54 yards. Two times. Now you're looking at it overall. He went 20 of 26. And of all the SWAT kickers who had 20 makes, right? Because not everybody, I think it was only 3, maybe 4 kickers who made 20 field goals this season. He had the best percentage of all of them. And when you're looking at from 50 yards, he was 4-7, 2 times from 54. All-American. He had it. So you got to salute him. And that's why I wanted to bring him up first, because he was the most critically acclaimed player on that team, easily. Now, he had a couple of defensive players that are worth highlighting. Defensive back Kevin Davis, and then also defensive lineman Fred Stokes Jr. The reason I highlight both of those is A, they stood out amongst the conference, and then B, it's arguably the two things that PV did really well. Like they took the ball away. They intercepted the ball pretty well. They were 4th in interceptions, but that's because Jackson State played 2 more games. And in those 2 more games, they got 4 interceptions. So really, it should be a 3-way tie for 3rd place. But if we're just basing off the regular season, but when you win the conference and you get to go to the conference championship game, and you get to go to Celebration Bowl, your numbers inflate and you deserve that. So technically, PV was 4th in interceptions this year. Kevin Davis had 3 of them. He was the only person on the team with multiple interceptions. And that 3 interceptions ranked pretty high in the conference as well. That was 5th in the conference specifically. He was 6th in pass deflections. Then you're looking at Stokes. He had 13 tackles for a loss. And mind you, the run defense is the other thing that PV did really well. So with those 13 tackles for a loss, you have to assume that he's leading the charge. You have to assume that he's the one leading the charge, because how do I want to phrase this? Yes, he is a defensive lineman getting 13 tackles for a loss, but at the same time, it's not the linebackers doing it. It's not the D tackles. Everybody's collaborating. He's the leader of the bunch. So that's how I want to phrase that. He paired that with 3.5 sacks for a loss, 11 quarterback hits. He had a really good season, right? And there's not many things you can say that about when it comes to PV this season. Then lastly, James Burns, who only played 9 games, would really hurt his overall totals, but he was 5th in yards per game. If he would have played a little bit more, you would have seen him higher on the raw numbers. But if you go per game basis, that's about where he was. This was not a good year for PV. There was some highlights in there. And I think this exemplifies why I won't do this for every school, right? Not every school had highlights. They had people who led the team, but you could lead the team with poor receiving yards. That's not the case here. He had 5, he was injured. But you could lead the team, and like if you had a quarterback, right? He led the team in passing. Don't mean he was great running the game. Some of these teams just flatlined this whole year. So I won't do this for every single school. Football season is technically over. We're extending it by looking at the seasons of these individual schools. But when basketball season kicks in, I'm not going to be I'm not going to continuously overlook what's happening in conference play in basketball to recap these games. So you will see some schools combined. I don't know how I'm going to do it yet. Like North Carolina Central, they'll stand alone. South Carolina State, Jackson State, Alabama State, FAMU, those 5 schools that I named right there, they will stand alone. Howard will probably stand alone because I got some things to say about them too. Alabama A&M, I have a list of schools that will probably stand alone. Mississippi Valley State, they probably aren't standing alone. Delaware, I I'm not going to give all my plans because I don't want to be a liar. I haven't brainstormed it all. But just know the vast majority is going to be about half and half. Half standalone, half are going to be combined because I do want to get to basketball season. I have a lot of good things planned, and we're not stopping the programming during the week. So if something big happens, we're going to interrupt our series to do this. Speaking of which, we're gonna have a Christmas special episode, so y'all enjoy that. It's gonna be really fun. It's gonna be a short one, so you can get back to your Christmas season. But we're gonna do something Christmassy. I don't know what it is yet, but we will do it. In the meantime, in between time, that's on Wednesday, so you can wait a little bit. I'll see you tomorrow. Until the next time we hear each other, family. Take care. Stay blessed. Peace.